Hello everyone, thanks for joining me on Create with Chris. I'm Chris Haughey, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to paint my latest design, Bee-utiful Summer. This is the second design in my brand new interchangeable surface series. These frames have pop-out panels that make decorating for every season a breeze. You can display it on a stand which is included with the surface. It can be hung on a wall, or it could even be placed in a wreath for instant charm. With my relaxed style of painting, all my tips, tricks, and techniques, this project is designed to be easy and impressive, even if you're a beginner. So grab your brushes and let's get started. I'm starting with the bottom panel, and this is an MDF surface. I did seal it with a multi-purpose sealer, let it dry, and then lightly sanded it. It just provides a good smooth base. The paint will adhere gentle to the brushes. It's just a great step in every painting. I am applying Spa Blue, and I'm using my 3/4 inch oval wash. I love using this because it shows very little, if any, brush strokes, starting mostly toward the center and pushing the paint towards the outer edge, being careful not to let the paint drip over the side edges. It fits snugly into the frame, but if there is paint on the side edges, that will make it just a little bit difficult. Easy to remedy, just use a little bit of sandpaper to lightly sand it and it'll slip in perfectly. Picked up a little bit of aqua sky on the toe of my 1/2 inch awesome angle, and my brush is very damp. Just loading the paint loosely and floating it. I kind of call it my slip slap float. It's not a smooth, even float. I just kind of scooch it around the edge, but because the brush is so wet, the paint stays movable for quite a long time. So I can pretty much go around the entire edge of the plaque without it drying, and then I can go back and coax it and blend it and move it and just soften it out very, very easily. Use the toe of the paint or a toe of the brush for the paint, and the clean heel, the back part of the brush, will smooth it out. Make sure that the brush is flat on the surface, and you can go around and play with it until the paint starts to tack up, and then you need to let it dry. You can always go back and have a second coat. It's so much easier to do a second coat than try to get it perfect the first time. The lettering can be stenciled or painted. I happen to have this stencil, and I'm a big fan of stencils because I struggle with painting letters. So I have loaded my number 4 Spectacular stencil brush with soft black. I wiped it over a paper towel. This is going to eliminate excess heavy paint on the tips of the bristles, and that's where the issues occur with paint running under the stencil. And if you've ever stenciled and you lift it up and the edges are kind of jagged and not real smooth and crisp and clean, too much paint on the brush. The brush is dry, the paint is minimal, I have a light touch. I'm kind of doing a swirl. I have found out it looks much better. The results are always perfect with a couple light coats, and sometimes if I'm using a light color over a dark surface, I can go back and stencil it, a couple, maybe 3 times to make sure that I get a nice opaque coverage. Normally I tape the stencil in place, but it's bigger than the piece, so I just have to make sure that I'm holding it down very tight. And you can see around the edge of the stencil, if it's covering, you don't see any empty spots, it should be just absolutely perfect. This is the first coat, and I did go back and add a second coat, and you can see the difference. Connecting the bridges, which are the little section of the stencil that hold the letters together, is optional. I really like the look that it provides. I think once those little bridges are painted in, to me it looks more hand painted instead of stenciled. So it depends on what project you're doing as far as what type of results, if you want to go in and connect the bridges or just leave the stenciled look. Either one is perfectly fine. I think it's just mostly a matter of personal preference. Because I applied 2 layers of paint on the stencil, when I connect the bridges, I will also go back and add 2 layers of paint so that it matches up with the opaqueness and the intensity of the stenciled letters. The camera wasn't on, but I'll catch you up real quick. The background is the same as the bottom panel, spa blue with aqua sky around the outer edges. The beehive is baby duck with a little bit of raw sienna shading. And what I'm doing now, I've just loaded the toe of my 1/2 inch awesome angle with raw sienna to define that front door. I wanted to add some highlights, so I've picked up a little bit of Snow White on the toe of my awesome angle. This is a very thin down float, and no, it looks strong, but as it dries it will diminish and become quite a bit more subtle. I'm just kind of popping it in there. I'm not being real particular. Using my number 12 Fantastic Filbert, and I want to kind of wash in the beehive door opening. Going back to the watermelon, I did base coat the entire watermelon with Snow White, and the center part is melon. Now I've picked up just a little bit of foliage green on my 1/2 inch angle. I just want to wash a nice even float across the rind, and you can see how wet my paint is. I flipped my brush over so I could edge the other side and just smooth it out, not dark, solid, or heavy. Going back now with raw sienna to reinforce the shading, and this is no different than the other shading. It's very loose, very thin paint. It doesn't take much. That's my mantra. It doesn't take much paint to make a big difference. And if my paint is thinned, I can move it around, manipulate it. It just becomes a soft hint instead of a solid, heavy, dark edging on it. And I think several light coats always look so much better than one heavy coat. And trying to work that in, just going up the right hand side. The beehive opening, I'm not sure what that's called. I'm just going back with a little more raw sienna to build that depth of color. Now I'm picking up tea berry on the toe of my 1/2 inch angle. Started at the top, and just my tappy float, I just tap it on and pull it down. It's not even and smooth because the watermelon flesh has texture in it, and I wanted to replicate that very easily. Again, my paint is very loose. You can see the shimmer. I can go in and play around with it, let it dry. I do jump around while one area is drying. I do jump to another area, and I'm just going back to the rind to put a second light wash over that, basically just to even it up, make it a little more smooth. And it goes that quickly. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. I wanted to show depth inside that opening, so I tucked in a little bit of soft black, and then I switched over to my 18-aught script liner and Snow White to line that right hand side. I have a number 10 Fabulous Flat, loaded it with plantation pine, tucked that edge of the chisel edge of the brush right against the white, pull it across slowly, evenly, and stop and lift. Perfect start and stop lines. Every line, if the pressure is kept even, every stripe is going to be the same width. Going back now with watermelon slice, same technique, just kind of floating that in there. Use the toe of my brush where the paint is to line that bottom edge, and then the rest of the brush just to pull it out with my tappy float and create that texture. And you can see how it shimmers. The paint's very loose, and I can tap it in there and pull it out, and it just gives amazing texture that looks like it took a long time to create. If the paint starts to dry up, just let it dry completely and then go back and add another layer. It doesn't have to be accomplished in one single layer. You can see all the different strokes, and it does look so much like watermelon rind. This is deep burgundy, and I really wanted to bring that red out. This is such a beautiful float color. It works well with this combination of melon and watermelon slice, and just really ramps up that beautiful watermelon deep rich tone. And I let it be darker at the bottom and on that left hand side, and pull it out towards the top. This is plantation pine. Now that those stripes have dried, I can go in and shade the bottom edge of the rind. And on this one, I just did a smooth float. I don't want it to necessarily be choppy. This is the top hanger. I thought it would be fun to put a little loop up there. It would give something to hang that bow on. And I'm using my number 2 Radical Round and Baby Duck, and this is the first time that I've painted this, so I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and want it to be sturdy enough so that if someone would decide to hang this beehive up, that it's going to hold the weight of the beehive. So it has to be substantial enough for that. I let it dry and picked up a little bit of raw sienna on my number 2 Radical Round just to kind of shade the base, the right side. Now I'm going back with a touch of Snow White to highlight kind of the top and left side. And now I'm just using my Epic script liner to sharpen those connection areas. Loading my Epic script liner with raw sienna, and want to put that trailing vine in there. And this is the same as for the bottom panel, but I'm just using an up and down, kind of a loose stroke, and I'm putting pressure on the wider parts, lifting it up to create skinny parts. And make sure that brush is loaded well, there's enough paint. I did go back and add a second coat. I wanted to thicken up the thicker parts, and where it gets skinny, it just really defines those. It's just a push and pull to create those thick and thin lines. Don't make it difficult. This is a twiggy vine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just need that in there. And I just used the rotation of my wrist to create those curves. You can see it's not perfect, but it does not need to be. This is what makes these designs so whimsical and playful. And it makes it a lot more fun to paint as well if you don't have unrealistic expectations on perfection. And it all works out. If it doesn't, we can always paint over it. Just adding a little bit of highlight and shading makes a world of difference. To create the daisy petals, I'm loading my number 8 Fantastic Filbert with Snow White. Start at the outer edges and kind of push, pull, and lift toward the center. It gives those beautiful little petal shapes. I don't want my flowers to be perfectly round. I just kind of let the brush create the shape of the flowers. Those little shorter front flowers make it look like a side view, and I reload for every petal. That way they're pretty much, I don't want to say consistent, but they look like they belong to the same flower. And if my point doesn't come out, I just go up on the toe of my brush. Allow that center section to be empty. That doesn't need to be completely full. And because this is the first time I painted it, I didn't have a pattern. I just kind of eyeballed it and let the brush create the shape of the flower. Wasn't fussy about it. I knew the flowers would be loose and would work no matter what I did. Be sure to kind of, as you get toward the center, to give that brush a little bit of a quarter turn and lift to get that nice point. and allow that center to be empty. Allow the flowers to flow off of the plaque. That adds a little more interest and makes it look like everything's not smooshed inside the border. It looks like the design flows on. Once it dries, white is always less prominent, so I did go back and add a second coat, mostly to darken the tips. I didn't particularly care if it was dark all the way to the center because I knew I was going to add some shading in the center. So you can see how much quicker I can add these petals in the second time round. Mostly just reinforcing that outer tip and brightening that up nicely. And the brush is doing all the work. I'm just kind of putting it where it needs to go. This is my number 5 Radical Round and Melon. Just want to paint those flower centers in, and I like it to be loose. I think it doesn't need to be round, kind of an oval, and everyone's different, and I think that just gives it a little more personality. And don't try to do it all solid and heavy the first time. I do go back and add a second coat just to make sure that it's pretty opaque. To paint the leaves, I am using number 10 Fabulous Flat. I've double loaded it with Plantation Pine and Foliage Green, kind of touch down between the petals, touch, press, pull out. Touch, press, and pull out, and you get these beautiful little pointy football shaped leaves. Don't try to go fast. Control the brush, let the brush create the shape of the leaf. If it doesn't come out quite perfect, let it dry and add a second application over top of it. Not every leaf is going to be identical, which is fine. Not every stroke is going to be perfect. It can always be touched up. Trying to decide where I need these leaves to be added. I want them to be full, but I don't want it to be crowded. Now I've loaded the toe of my 3/8 inch angle with a little bit of tea berry to add some color around the bottom and the right side of the flower centers. And then I thought maybe this would be a pretty color to shade the base of the petals. So I just have paint on the toe of my brush, and I'm kind of tucking it down there around the flower center, and I'm using a zigzag kind of stroke to pull it up, pull it up, pull it up and back, up and back. And what it does is going to coax that paint up into the petals and almost create the look of veining. So allow that brush to kind of go back and forth, and I did speed it up because it just takes time to add that in. Just a hint of color. I allowed it to be a little bit darker on the right hand side, not as deep on the middle or the left hand side. My light source is on the top left, so I kind of keep that in mind. Now I'm adding just a hint of Snow White on the top left of those flower centers, and you can see how that really, they're starting to stand out a little bit. I'm going in now with my 1/4 inch angle and a little bit of Plantation Pine. I want to shade the base of those leaves, and anywhere that it might be a little bit darker. I do this very loosely. I'm not too fussy. I'm not a fussy painter. So I'm just kind of adding that look of shading in there. I do try to keep the darker side toward the bottom or on the right hand side. It just gives a little more consistency. Now this is the highlight. This is Celery Shoot. And I'm just putting a splash of color in. I'm not even really blending it that much. I kind of like the look of, just use the toe of the brush, kind of pull it down and press it a little bit. You get that splash of color. I like the way that looked, and it's super easy to do. Kind of let your hair down and get brave and just let the brush kind of pop that in. And I did go back and brighten it a second time. After it dries, you can look at it and see if it's super dull. And even later on, it can be added. So don't think once you're finished with the leaves and you move on that you're finished with the leaves. I did load my 20-aught Epic script liner with celery shoot to line the center veins. This is where you get a little more detail. Adding some watermelon slice just to strengthen the shading on those flower centers. Look what that little bit of paint does. I just think that's so pretty. And also what this is doing, this is pulling the continuity, the watermelon, the flower centers, and then we'll be doing the ladybug too, so it pulls that all together. The seeds are just a touch, pull and twist, and this is soft black. I can paint the ladybug or I can use my circle stencil. I have all the basic stencils, just makes my life so much easier. I have astigmatism with my eyes. It's hard for me to do circles. So I just stenciled this with melon, and then now I'm going over it with tea berry. Just really brightens it up. These layers, it's not a heavy coverage, just a light second top coat, but it really helps that to glow. Adding some little branches on the vine, and I'm using my 18-aught script liner and raw sienna. This is such a pretty color, and this is another color that I'm repeating kind of throughout. It's the shading on the beehive, it's the branches, so it works really well together. I think all of these colors are so fresh and summery. I really enjoyed doing this. It was such a nasty day when I was painting. It was cold and rainy, so this was kind of my little mini summer vacation. Now I'm going in with the leaves, and I'm using a number 4 flat, and same concept as the bigger leaves. Double load it with plantation pine and foliage green, kind of touch, press, and pull out. Don't try to rush this. And the first set of leaves I did were foliage green alone, and they just don't show up. So don't be afraid to double load colors on the brush for a little more visibility. And it does make it easier, so much easier to do one stroke as opposed to putting a base coat and then another shading and then another highlight. So it's not really a shortcut. I call that painting smarter, because I think in the long run it even enhances the final results because it looks less fussy and it just flows a little bit easier. And this is such a fun, whimsical piece. You really need to enjoy painting it because it's just delightful. And don't worry about getting on the branches. They don't have to be on both sides of that main branch. I did sets of 3. Did 2 on the other one because I couldn't get it to fit 3 in, so it can be adjusted according to where your branch is. Don't worry about it flowing off the edge of the plaque. Sometimes that looks nice as well. I am going back now with plantation pine. I am connecting the leaves to the branches using my 20-aught script liner. Pull a little bit of it up into the leaf, and that way it looks like a little mini vein, and you don't have to worry about adding that in later. Just start at the branch and pull it right up into the leaf. Look, how easy is that? Let me know if you enjoy my tips and tricks. I think it's so much fun to be able to expedite painting and still have it look really nice. You don't want it to look like you were rushed, but these little tricks that can make the painting flow easier are just a win-win. It looks better, you feel better about it, and it just comes together almost magically. Now I'm going in, this is plantation pine, and sometimes I do a little fussy painting. Some of those leaves, the veins on the leaves did not show the center vein very well. So I'm just going in with plantation pine and adding a little bit of a shade on that center vein. You can see how it really starts to pop that out. And when I do these veins, I wanted to mention too, I never do the veins straight. I like to put a little wiggle in them. Going back in, same thing we did with the watermelon. I want to make that ladybug not pink, I want him to be red. So I'm going in with watermelon slice, my very favorite color, and I'm just floating it from the bottom right. I want my highlights on the top left, so I'm just floating it that way. Picked up some soft black on my number 5 radical round. The point is really good for getting in small areas, deepening that shading inside the beehive opening. Look at that depth. I thought it was finished, but I had to go back and add just that one more little float of color. The antennae are soft black with the 20-aught. Dip dot the tips with soft black in my stylus. Now I'm adding little berries, and I wasn't sure what color berries I wanted to add. So I started with melon, and I didn't think the melon had enough presence. So I went in with tea berry and added a few more, and then I decided I kind of liked the mixture of melon and tea berry, so I'm jumping around. I'm adding some melon berries, I'm adding tea berries, I'm adding watermelon slice berries, and just kind of shake it up because all these different shades of pink and red together just look very delightful. I just think they absolutely fill it out perfectly. They add a little bit of color. It's more exciting than just one color. And I keep your hand out of the dip dots. Got my hand in the antenna on the ladybug. I had to clean that up. So pay attention. I decided I wanted to define my flowers a little bit more. I'm using a 0.01 micron. Okay guys, this can be very relaxing and fun and enjoyable. So I'm not perfectly outlining the petals. I'm loosely outlining the petals, and I'm not particularly concerned if they're not even and perfect. I think that just adds to the whimsy of this design. Do keep in mind you cannot go faster with the micron, then the ink will flow out of the pen. So if it starts to skip, you need to slow down just a little bit. I decided to do the leaves and add a few little side veins, not the center vein, but a couple little side veins on one side of the flower. I did the flower centers with a little bit of a wiggle. I like that little bit of, it just looks like it's a little frillier, and just allow it to loosely fill in. This is almost kind of therapeutic for me. Let me know if you've used pen work with your acrylic painting. I think it adds a lot of detail very easily, especially on whimsical pieces. I don't use it all the time, but every now and then it just kind of calls for that little extra detail. And all of these colors are bright and light, so adding this little bit of outlining just really sets it off and has that one more element that ramps up the final appearance. And you can see how loosely I'm kind of outlining that. Same thing on the leaves, just loose. If you like watching my videos, let me know. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. If you have painting friends, be sure to share it with them. If you have any thoughts or ideas on future videos that you would like to see, let me know. I have several more of the interchangeables coming up very soon. So now I am adding little comma strokes on the seeds, and I'm using my stylus dip, dot, and drag. And you'll have a perfect comma every time. Dip, dot, and drag. It's that easy. And to brighten up these little berries, add a little tiny dip dot of Snow White in the top left. And I want you to look at how sweet those berries sparkle and shine. And I did add little dip dots in the center of the daisies as well. But look out, what a difference. Just like they come to life. I love adding these little details that do make a big difference. Such a simple touch of paint, but big results. And oftentimes it's the little things that you do that do have the biggest effect on the painting. Picked up a little bit of deep burgundy and I'm shading along bottom and right side of the Ladybug just to add that depth and that richness so that it looks more red. And I'm not good at circles, but I use my painter's pal to add the Ladybug spots. I'm using my spectacular stencil brush and soft black, just a very light, even touch. I'm cleaning my stencil in between applications because that way I can see exactly through it and placement. I did bump down to a smaller size to do the bottom dots. I thought that would just give a little more interest. They wouldn't be all identically the same. I took my time and I stenciled these with just one layer. I didn't want them too solid or heavy. Just a hint of aqua sky. I'm using my 1/4 inch awesome angle. Aqua sky is what I used in the background on the edging, and just that little float of color adds a rich coolness to the shadow areas, and I'm kind of popping it in a little bit here and there. Don't diminish the shaded areas so that they all become the same mid-tone, but a little bit on the leaves, a little bit on the flower centers, and you can see it's just a very light touch, a little bit on the Ladybug. And now I'm going in with raw sienna and my number 5 Radical Round. Very, very, very thin paint. This is a transparent shadow, so it's just a hint of color. I'm mimicking the shape and kind of doing a drop shadow just below, and so it looks like that the leaves and the flower petals, the Ladybug, are all shading on the beehive and the watermelon. Wanted to highlight the branch, so if you have any issues with your branch being a little too thick or heavy, this is the perfect solution. You don't need to go back and repaint it. Just add a little highlight on there. Look how that sparkles and glows. It's just absolutely perfect. My paint is very, very thin. This looks like a bright highlight, but it is a very light, it will dry very lightly. I'm using my 20-aught script liner, and then I thought some of these leaves needed to be a little more contrast needed to be built on the leaves. So I'm using my 20-aught Epic script liner and a little bit of Snow White just to edge those leaves. This will resonate as a highlight, so I'm thinking top left side mostly, but some places that really would look better on the other side. So kind of keep an eye on it, put it where it makes sense. And look how those leaves lift out. And it looks bright. Your finger's a great smudge, so if you get too much on, you can lift it off with your finger or a damp paper towel. And look how that brightens those up. Just absolutely, that little tiny little stroke makes a big difference. And it doesn't take long. Make sure that paint is thinned well and the brush is loaded correctly. You should be able to get quite a few strokes before you have to reload. Adding just a hint of that aqua sky on the base of some of those leaves I missed. I guess I only did a few, and so this is adding some more. It just really gives that cool shadow depth to those leaves. I think it ramps it up a lot. Don't add so much blue that it looks like the sky is showing through the leaves. It's just reflecting. I'm using my diverse dry brush with Snow White. Wipe it on a paper towel. This is the perfect way to add highlights. Oh my gosh, it's so easy. Load the brush, wipe it on a paper towel, and then just dry brush. I'm doing the flowers, the Ladybug, brightening up the highlights on the beehive. just goes so quickly, makes such a big difference. The diverse dry brushes are one of my newer brushes, and I use them every single time I paint. I am so thrilled with the results on these. It just makes you look really, really good without working really, really hard. Look how easily those highlights glow. I know I'm spending a little more time talking about this, but I think these are the little tricks that add so much without working so hard. Using my number 5 radical round to base coat the bee bodies with baby duck. And I'm being careful on how I apply the paint. I want to follow the contour of the body and smooth it out. If I put the base coat on nice and smooth, the second coat, when I apply it, will go on perfectly, and I won't need to go back and add a third or a fourth coat, especially on the lighter colors. A lot of times it's a little more difficult to get an even coverage. If you have an oval stencil that would work, this would be ideal for that as well. This is raw sienna. I just want to put a little shade across the bottom of their tummies to give a little roundness there. And it's just one nice smooth float using my 3/8 inch awesome angle. And I've picked up my number 4 Fabulous Flat, adding the stripes with soft black. Touch at the top even with the bee and go to the bottom and lift it up right at the bottom. Now my stripe wasn't solid and heavy, but that's okay. I'll go back and add a second coat. In fact, I kind of liked it, so I'm not sure I even will. But it's always best to go back and add a second coat as opposed to getting it on too thick and heavy the first time. So allow your brush to create the stripes, and then you can go back and hone in and brighten them up if needed. I dropped down to a number 2 radical round to paint their little heads, just soft black, just a real simple base coat. Again, this will have a second coat on it, so I'm not too worried about it. And I just kind of scoop around and create that little rounded head. Make sure it seats well on the body. I thought it would be fun to add a little bit of brightness on the bee bodies, so I'm just loading a little bit of tea berry kind of float across the bottom, and I just kind of did the yellow parts. But look how it glows. I think that was such a great idea. While that's drying, I picked up my 01 liner, and I'm just adding a little bit of a wiggle line around the white part of the watermelon rind. The bottom edge, I kept that smooth. And then I decided I needed to go across the top and just kind of connect that right there. Because I work on the design as a whole instead of just completing one object and then going to the next, it gives me time to think about what I want to do. So after I outlined the watermelon, I decided that the ladybug needed outlined as well. Adding a little bit of highlight on the bees' heads just to give that round dimension. I'm using my 1/4 inch awesome angle just to give that little float on there, and then Snow White and the wings. And I'm kind of scooping around. I wasn't sure if I wanted the wings to be kind of filmy and see-through, or whether I wanted them solid, more solid, not completely solid, but more translucent as opposed to transparent, I guess would be a good description. I start out very light, and then I can decide if I wanted to go back and deepen it down. I left the wings a little gauzy, and then I outlined them with the black micron. That gives them enough visibility that they stand out well. Anybody that can hold a pencil can outline with the micron pens. They are permanent when they dry, but just be aware that while they're still wet, they can smear just a little bit. I painted the antenna soft black with a 20-aught script liner, and then just dip dot the tips of them using the stylus. And then I went back with my micron to create some little crazy flight lines on the bees. I do have a pattern available with a traceable, and all that information is below. But be aware, just because you traced my pattern to paint on your surface, sometimes things just kind of shift in translation. They can be anything. This one, I didn't want it to go through the leaves or the berries, so I had to make a flight adjustment there. And then after I put the flight lines on, I thought it needed to be outlined in black. So I stop and start in places where my pen's not going to show if I don't meet it perfectly. For example, I start in the middle of a black stripe and then I can connect it. And if they don't exactly meet up, it's not going to be noticeable. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Do the easy little bits that make it work well for you. I always pull my lines towards me, so I do spin my project quite a bit. I took a lot of spinning out so I wouldn't make you dizzy. I wanted to outline the beehive, but I didn't want to do it solid because I have trouble with that. So I just did a short line and a couple tiny little dashes, and it looks so sweet. It's such a whimsical way to edge something and make it look very nice without stressing yourself out. And it just creates that really cute outline, but I don't have to worry about it being perfectly even. Let those lines flow and be smooth. If you start to stress about the length of the line, just lift the pen and put a couple dashes in and continue on. It just adds to the charm of the design and makes it very playful. And this is a summer design, so it should be relaxing and fun and bright and airy. All the things you love about summer. This is the frame, and again, I don't want paint to get down the side edges, so I'm using a triangle wedge-shaped cosmetic sponge, and I'm loading the bottom of it with black paint. I have a very light touch. I don't have heavy paint on the sponge. It's no different than a brush. If you overload it, it's going to run down the sides. So I have moisture in my sponge, a light touch, reload often, don't let it build up on the sponge, and just give a light coverage. Now, let it dry and add a second coat. So much better to do 2 light coats than 1 super heavy coat. Gives a perfect coverage. This is Aleene's tacky glue, and I'm just running a bead around the frame. If it's too thick and heavy, it's going to squish out. Pay attention to that inner edge, because if you get the glue on the frame and it squishes out toward the inner edge, the panels might have a little bit of trouble fitting. So I'm just going to place it on the back panel, press it down. I always stand it up to make sure that it is evenly matched. Let it dry, and look at that. Isn't that wonderful? The little moon shapes in the back are there, so you can very easily push them with your finger and it pops the panel out. Look at that. Same thing for the bottom panel, just pop it out. What's nice about this, because it doesn't glue in, you can pop the panels out and paint both sides. Now this is a new back stand that we're including with this piece, and I am going to glue it on the back, and to make sure that it is nice and straight, my favorite tool is a T-square. Just going to line it up to make sure that it's tight on the bottom and perfectly vertical. The wedge can be slipped in and glued. If you are gifting it, it can also be glued in place after it is received. Thank you so much for painting with me today on Create with Chris. You'll find everything I used, including a traceable pattern, step-by-step instructions. The links are listed in the description below. Don't forget to like, comment, and share with your painting friends. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something new, and most of all, I hope you had fun. If you do paint Bee-utiful Summer, I would absolutely love to see it, so be sure to share it with me. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together. And remember, a little bit of paint makes a big difference.